Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
I stood in my childhood bedroom, folding the last of my belongings into worn suitcases, while celebration echoed from downstairs. The power of attorney documents and house keys lay abandoned on my dresser, where I had placed them after walking out of the family meeting. 10 years of sacrifice. 10 years of quietly holding this family together, and they had just handed everything to Lena after she had been home for exactly 1 week. The sealed envelope on the kitchen counter would explain what my sister was truly inheriting when she opened it tomorrow morning. Through my bedroom window, I could hear Dad toasting Lena's new responsibilities and Mom praising her maturity. They had no idea what storm was coming. The nightmare began 10 years ago when I was 22 and thought my biggest worry was choosing between the navy blue or charcoal gray suit for my first job interview in Denver. I had just graduated with my accounting degree. Sarah was planning our move to Colorado, and life stretched ahead of us like an open highway. Then, Dad collapsed at the kitchen table on a Tuesday morning, clutching his chest, while Mom screamed for me to call 911. The heart attack changed everything. 3 days in intensive care, followed by surgery, followed by a cardiologist's grim assessment that Dad would need ongoing treatment and could never return to his physically demanding construction job. While Dad was still connected to monitors and tubes, Mom received her diabetes diagnosis during a routine checkup prompted by the stress. Suddenly, my parents faced a future of mounting medical bills with drastically reduced income. I remember sitting in the hospital cafeteria with Sarah, her engagement ring catching the fluorescent light as she reached across the table. "Maybe we should postpone Denver for a few months," I suggested, "just until things stabilize." Sarah's face showed the first crack of doubt that would eventually shatter our relationship. "Kato, you can't fix everything," she said. "Your parents have insurance, Social Security. There are programs to help." What Sarah didn't understand was that insurance covered 60% of Dad's cardiac medications, leaving $800 monthly out of pocket. Medicare supplemental policies cost more than Dad's reduced pension could handle. Mom's insulin requirements meant another $600 monthly in pharmacy bills. Their modest savings evaporated within 3 months. So I made the choice that would define the next decade of my life. I turned down the Denver position, broke up with Sarah before she could leave me, and took a local job at Henderson Accounting Services for $37,000 annually. My parents never knew that I immediately opened a second checking account and began what I told myself would be temporary financial assistance. The first payment was Dad's cardiac catheterization copay of $2,800. I told them I had negotiated a payment plan with the hospital. The second was Mom's first insulin prescription. The third was the month they couldn't make their mortgage payment because Dad's disability check arrived late. Each time, I created elaborate stories about insurance adjustments, payment deferrals, or lucky timing with unexpected refunds. Within 6 months, I was working 3 jobs to maintain the illusion that everything was manageable. Monday through Friday at Henderson Saturdays, doing bookkeeping for Martinez Auto Repair, and Sundays balancing accounts for Thompson's Garden Center. I told my parents the weekend work was building my professional network, while actually using every extra dollar to cover their mounting expenses. The hardest part was watching Lena pack for art school in California that August. Her face glowing with excitement as Mom and Dad helped load her car with supplies they couldn't afford. "Follow your dreams, sweetheart," Dad had said, hugging her tight. "Don't let anything hold you back like we did." The irony burned. They were encouraging Lena's freedom, while I quietly surrendered mine to keep their lives stable. Christmas that year, I sold my Honda Civic to help cover Dad's emergency bypass surgery. I told everyone I was embracing public transportation for environmental reasons. Valentine's Day. I used my student loan refund to pay Mom's emergency room visit when her blood sugar spiked. I told them their insurance had covered everything. Years blurred together in a routine of careful financial deception. I became expert at juggling payment schedules, explaining away my constant exhaustion, and deflecting questions about my personal life. Dates were impossible when every spare dollar went to medical bills. Vacations were fantasy when I worked every holiday to earn overtime pay that disappeared into my parents' expenses. My biggest fear was that they would discover the truth and feel guilty. So I became increasingly creative with explanations. When I couldn't afford to fix my apartment's heating system and spent winter months in libraries and coffee shops, I told them I preferred studying outside the home. When I started buying generic brand everything and cooking meals from rice and canned vegetables, I claimed to be exploring minimalist living. The saddest part was watching my parents worry about me. "Cato works too hard," Mom would tell her friends. "He never takes time for himself." Dad would shake his head and say, "I wish that boy would find a nice girl and settle down instead of always focusing on work." They saw my sacrifice as workaholism and my isolation as social awkwardness, never realizing that both were direct results of keeping their comfortable retirement intact. By my 30th birthday, I had developed a sophisticated system of financial management that kept my parents' household running smoothly while maintaining their dignity. They believed their Social Security and Dad's pension covered their basic needs, never suspecting that I had been paying their mortgage for 3 years, covering all utility bills, and handling every medical expense that exceeded their budget. The weight of carrying this secret grew heavier each year, but seeing them happy and stress-free made every sacrifice worthwhile. At least I thought it did, until Lena returned home with designer luggage and announced she was ready to help the family. Lena's return felt like watching a movie star step into our modest living room. She swept through the front door wearing a cream-colored cashmere coat that probably cost more than I earned in 2 months. Her hair styled in perfect waves that spoke of expensive salon treatments. Behind her, a sleek black BMW sat in our driveway, its gleaming surface reflecting the afternoon sun like a mirror. "Family," she announced, spreading her arms wide as if embracing an audience. "I'm home, and I'm ready to give back to the people who raised me right." Mom rushed to hug her, tears streaming down her face, while Dad beamed with pride at his successful daughter who had made it in Los Angeles. Over dinner that first night, Lena regaled us with stories of her accomplishments. She had worked her way up in the interior design industry. She claimed building relationships with celebrity clients and high-end contractors. Her apartment overlooked the Pacific Ocean, she said, and her client list included actors whose names I recognized from television shows. When Dad asked about her finances, Lena waved dismissively and mentioned her diversified investment portfolio and multiple revenue streams. "I've learned so much about money management," she said, cutting into the steak that cost more than our usual weekly grocery budget. "Financial responsibility is everything in business. You have to think strategically, plan for the future, and never let emotions cloud your judgment." Mom nodded approvingly, while I fought the urge to laugh at the irony. The transformation in my parents was immediate and jarring. Suddenly, they had hope again. They talked excitedly about Lena's success, her maturity, her obvious business acumen. "She gets it," Dad said proudly. "She understands what it takes to succeed in today's world." Meanwhile, they continued to worry about my lack of direction and wondered aloud why I couldn't follow Lena's example of ambitious goal setting. On Lena's 6th day home, Dad called a family meeting. We gathered in the living room, where I had spent countless evenings helping him organize medical bills and insurance paperwork, though he never knew the extent of my involvement in resolving those financial puzzles. Your mother and I have made an important decision. Dad began his voice, carrying the formal tone he reserved for serious announcements. We're getting older, and managing our affairs has become increasingly complicated. We need someone we trust to handle our legal and financial responsibilities. My stomach clenched with sudden dread. I had been managing their affairs for years, but they didn't know that. From their perspective, they were simply aging parents who needed help organizing their modest retirement income and basic expenses. Lena. Dad continued, turning toward my sister with a smile. You've proven yourself in the business world. You understand financial management, legal responsibilities, and strategic planning in ways that your mother and I never learned. We want you to have our power of attorney and eventually inherit the family home. The words hit me like physical blows. I watched Dad hand Lena a folder containing documents they had prepared with their lawyer papers that granted her complete authority over their financial decisions and medical care. Mom nodded approvingly as she added, You've shown such responsibility and success, sweetheart. You deserve this opportunity to lead the family. Lena accepted the documents with gracious humility, speaking about the honor of serving her parents and her commitment to their well-being. I promise to handle everything with the same careful attention I give my business ventures, she said. Your trust means everything to me. What made the moment unbearable was not just the transfer of authority, but the reasoning behind it. Dad explained that they had worried about burdening me with family responsibilities since I was still trying to establish myself professionally. Mom added that they could see how hard I was working and didn't want to add stress to my life. Cato has such a big heart, Mom said, patting my hand sympathetically. He works so hard at those little jobs of his, and we don't want him to feel obligated to take care of us. That wouldn't be fair to a young man who's still figuring out his career path. The devastating irony was that while they praised Lena's financial sophistication, I had been successfully managing their complex financial situation for years. While they worried about burdening me with responsibility, I had already shouldered every burden they could imagine. While they celebrated Lena's maturity, I had been making mature sacrifices since the day I turned down Denver to stay home. Sitting in that living room surrounded by furniture I had helped maintain, and in a house whose mortgage I had been paying, I realized that my decade of selfless service had made me invisible to the people I loved most. Because I had protected them from financial stress so effectively, they saw me as the struggling son who needed protection rather than the capable provider who had been their foundation. When the meeting ended with handshakes and congratulations, I excused myself to my bedroom while my parents and Lena celebrated their family's bright future. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling and finally admitted a truth I had been avoiding. My parents didn't respect me because they didn't know me. The son they saw was a careful construction I had built to hide my actual accomplishments and struggles. The decision crystallized as I listened to their continued celebration downstairs. If they wanted Lena to handle family responsibilities, she was welcome to handle all of them, including the ones she couldn't possibly imagine existed. But they deserved to understand exactly what they were asking her to inherit. The breaking point came 3 days later when I returned early from work to find Lena pacing frantically in the backyard, her phone pressed against her ear. I was walking toward the back door when her voice carried clearly through the screen. Please, I'm begging you for more time, she said, her polished confidence completely gone. I know I'm behind on payments, but I told you I'm working on it. My family situation is about to change everything. There was a pause, then her voice became desperate. No, please don't call my parents. I swear I'll have the money next month. I stood frozen as the conversation continued, revealing the catastrophic truth. Lena owed $47,000 to various creditors in Los Angeles. Her apartment had been repossessed 2 months ago. Her car was leased through a company that had threatened legal action, and her designer wardrobe was purchased entirely with credit cards she could no longer pay. She hadn't returned home to help family. She had fled California because debt collectors were tracking her down. The woman my parents had just entrusted with their financial future was hiding from bankruptcy while creating an elaborate facade of success. Every story about celebrity clients and investment portfolios had been complete fiction designed to impress a family she hadn't spoken to in months. After Lena ended her call and hurried back inside, I remained in the yard trying to process the magnitude of this deception. My parents had just granted legal authority over their finances to someone who was financially irresponsible to a degree that bordered on criminal negligence. Worse, they had done it while dismissing their actual financial caretaker as too immature to handle adult responsibilities. That evening, while my family planned Lena's new role over dinner, I excused myself and began writing the letter that would end this charade forever. I started with hurt, pouring out years of accumulated pain about being overlooked and undervalued. Then anger took over as I detailed every sacrifice I had made while they praised Lena's non-existent accomplishments. But eventually, I settled on simple facts. Emotions could be dismissed or misunderstood, but numbers would speak for themselves. I began with documentation. Bank statements showing every payment I had made to their mortgage company for the past 3 years. Receipts for medical expenses. I had covered utility bills. I had paid insurance premiums I had handled. Credit card statements revealing how I had financed their comfortable retirement through personal debt that I was still paying off. The letter grew into a comprehensive financial disclosure that revealed the complex web of support I had built around their lives. They would learn that their house would have been foreclosed in 2021 if I hadn't refinanced their mortgage and taken personal responsibility for payments. They would discover that Mom's insulin had been supplied through my pharmaceutical benefits program for the past 4 years. They would see documentation showing that Dad's cardiac medications were purchased through my health savings account because their insurance had stopped covering several necessary prescriptions. I included proof that I had been paying their property taxes, homeowners insurance, and flood insurance for the past 2 years. Receipts showed my coverage of major home repairs, including the new roof after the storm damage, the furnace replacement, and the electrical system upgrade required by their insurance company. I had quietly handled these massive expenses while maintaining their belief that their modest income could support their lifestyle. The most damaging evidence was financial. I calculated that over 10 years, I had contributed $237,000 to their household expenses. This included major medical bills, daily living costs, home maintenance insurance premiums, and emergency expenses they never knew existed. I had essentially been supporting 3 people on multiple incomes while allowing them to believe they were financially independent. But the letter's conclusion was what would destroy Lena's confidence. I detailed the exact monthly expenses she was inheriting: mortgage payments of $1,400, combined utility bills averaging $600, monthly insurance premiums totaling $800, ongoing medical expenses of $1,200, and routine maintenance costs that averaged $400 monthly. The total monthly requirement was $4,400, while Mom and Dad's combined income was $2,800. I explained that their current financial stability was entirely dependent on my supplemental income, which would end immediately when I moved to Denver. Lena would need to cover a monthly shortfall of $1,600, plus any unexpected medical or household emergencies. Given her own debt situation, this responsibility would bankrupt her within 60 days. The letter concluded with my decision to accept the senior accountant position I had been offered at Morrison and Associates in Denver, a prestigious firm that had been recruiting me for 3 years. I would be leaving within the week, taking with me the financial support system that had kept their household functioning for the past decade. As I sealed the envelope, I felt a mixture of liberation and sadness. Liberation because I was finally claiming the life I had postponed for their comfort. Sadness because it had taken this level of deception to force honesty into our family relationships. I placed the letter on the kitchen counter where Lena would find it during her morning coffee routine, then spent my last night in the house where I had sacrificed my 20s for people who had never acknowledged my contributions. Tomorrow, they would learn what their choices actually cost. I left the house before sunrise, loading my belongings into the rental truck I had reserved for my move to Denver. As I drove away, I could see the kitchen light flickering on, knowing that within minutes, Lena would discover the letter that would shatter their family celebration. By the time I reached the Colorado state line, my phone had accumulated 17 missed calls and 43 unread text messages. I turned off the device and focused on the highway ahead, leaving my family to confront the reality I had protected them from for 10 years. Meanwhile, back home, Lena had awakened with confidence about her new responsibilities. She made coffee in the kitchen, where my letter waited like a bomb with a timer, then settled at the breakfast table to review the power of attorney documents Dad had given her. She was planning her approach to family financial management when she noticed the sealed envelope marked with her name in my careful handwriting. The first page confused her. She read my opening words several times, trying to understand why I was thanking her for accepting the true cost of family leadership. The second page made her stomach clench as she began to grasp the scope of expenses she had never considered. By the third page, her hands were trembling as bank statements and receipts revealed the massive financial infrastructure I had built around our parents' lives. When she reached the mortgage documentation, showing that I had been paying $1,400 monthly for 3 years, her coffee mug slipped from her fingers and shattered on the kitchen floor. Mom came running at the sound, finding Lena staring at papers spread across the table with growing horror on her face. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Mom asked, then stopped as she noticed the familiar letterhead of their mortgage company. "Why do you have those papers?" Lena's voice was barely a whisper as she read aloud. "Total medical expenses covered by Cato Williams from 2014 through 2024, $87,312. She looked up at Mom with confusion and panic. "Is this real?" Mom's face went pale as she recognized the insurance statements and medical bills scattered across the table. Papers she thought had been handled by their insurance company bore stamps showing "Paid in full by Cato Williams." Prescription receipts she had never seen revealed that someone else had been covering her insulin costs for years. The moment of complete revelation came when Lena found the attached note explaining the house ownership transfer. During the mortgage refinancing in 2021, I had needed to add my name to the deed to qualify for the loan. Our parents had signed the papers without reading them, carefully trusting my explanation that it was a routine procedural requirement. In reality, I now held majority ownership of their home, having invested more in its preservation than they had contributed in the past decade. "You're joking!" Lena screamed, her voice carrying through the house and into the neighboring yards. The sound brought both parents running as Lena's composure completely collapsed. "This can't be real. He can't have been paying for everything. Where did this money come from?" Her scream also attracted the attention of Mrs. Patterson from next door, who appeared at her window with concern. Within minutes, curious neighbors were gathering on their front porches, drawn by the commotion emanating from our usually quiet household. Dad snatched the papers from Lena's hands, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and dawning comprehension as he read documentation of my financial involvement in their lives. The utility bills alone told a devastating story every month for the past 5 years. Payments had come from my personal checking account rather than their joint account. How did we not know? Mom whispered, sinking into a kitchen chair as the magnitude of their oversight became clear. How could we miss this? The answer lay in my careful deception. I had intercepted bills before they could see them handled payments through my own accounts and created a seamless system that maintained their belief in their financial independence. They had never questioned where money came from because I had made it appear effortlessly. Lena's panic intensified as she calculated the monthly expenses she would inherit. Her own debt situation made it impossible to cover even basic utilities, much less mortgage payments and medical bills. The debt collectors she had been avoiding in California would easily track her down once she attempted to access credit for family expenses. "I can't do this," she admitted through tears, her sophisticated facade crumbling completely. "I don't have this kind of money. I thought they needed help organizing paperwork and maybe writing some checks. I never imagined." Dad tried calling my phone repeatedly, each attempt going directly to voicemail. The recording he left grew increasingly desperate. "Cato, son, please call us back. We need to talk about this. We had no idea. Please don't leave things like this." But I was already 4 hours away, driving toward a life I had postponed for a decade, while my family finally confronted the true cost of comfort they had taken for granted. Behind me, 3 people were learning that love and support require acknowledgement to remain sustainable, and that respect cannot exist without understanding. The neighbors eventually retreated to their homes, leaving my family alone with papers that revealed how thoroughly they had misunderstood their own lives. In their hands lay evidence of a devotion so complete that it had made itself invisible, and a sacrifice so total that it had disguised itself as ordinary life. For 3 days, my family lived in a state of financial panic that was entirely new to them. Bills arrived with no one qualified to pay them. Creditors called, asking for someone named Cato, who had been handling their accounts. And the simple act of grocery shopping became an exercise in budget calculation they had avoided for years. Lena's attempts to secure emergency funding failed spectacularly. Her bank declined her loan application within hours, citing her existing debt burden and recent missed payments. Credit card companies that had once courted her business now refused to extend additional credit. The friends she contacted in Los Angeles, whom she had hoped would provide temporary financial assistance, revealed their own knowledge of her financial troubles and politely declined to get involved. Meanwhile, Dad discovered the true extent of my professional reputation when my former weekend clients began calling to check on my availability. Martinez Auto Repair wanted to confirm my bookkeeping schedule. Thompson's Garden Center needed help with their quarterly tax preparation, and Henderson Accounting Services called to ask why I hadn't submitted my 2-week notice before disappearing. Cato's been our most reliable consultant. Mr. Martinez explained when Dad questioned him about my involvement with his business. 3 years running our books, never missed a deadline, saved us thousands in tax preparation fees. You should be proud of that boy. He's got more integrity than accountants twice his age. These conversations painted a picture of professional competence that directly contradicted my parents' perception of my career struggles. Thompson mentioned that I had been managing accounts for 6 different businesses while maintaining my primary employment, generating supplemental income that explained how I could afford to support their household without apparent strain. The breaking point came when Dad opened their mortgage statement and realized the next payment was due in 11 days. $1,400 that might as well have been $1 million given their current resources and Lena's financial crisis. "We have to find him," Mom declared on the 3rd day, her voice carrying a determination born of desperation. "We have to go to Denver and make this right." The 8-hour drive to Denver gave my family time to process the magnitude of their oversight and plan their approach to what they now understood was a justified confrontation. Dad practiced apologies, while Mom compiled a list of questions about financial details they had never considered important. Lena sat quietly in the back seat, overwhelmed by the responsibility she had accepted without understanding its scope. Finding me proved easier than they expected. Henderson Accounting had provided Morrison and Associates contact information when Dad explained the family emergency. The prestigious downtown Denver office building where I now worked stood in stark contrast to the modest accounting service they thought represented my professional ceiling. Morrison and Associates occupied 3 floors of a gleaming high-rise, its lobby featuring marble surfaces and contemporary artwork that spoke of serious financial success. When my family approached the reception desk asking for Cato Williams, the receptionist's face brightened with recognition. "Mr. Williams is in a client meeting," she said professionally, "but I can schedule an appointment if this is regarding business consultation. May I ask which firm you represent?" Dad's confusion was evident as he explained they were family members who needed to speak with me urgently. The receptionist's expression shifted to concern as she made a quick phone call, then directed them to a comfortable waiting area. Within minutes, Marcus Morrison himself appeared, a distinguished man in his 60s who greeted my family with genuine warmth. "You must be Cato's parents," he said, shaking Dad's hand firmly. "He's spoken about you often. I'm Marcus Morrison, senior partner here." The conversation that followed devastated my parents' understanding of my career trajectory. Morrison explained that his firm had been courting me for 3 years, impressed by my reputation in the regional accounting community and my innovative approach to complex financial management. My weekend consulting work had generated recommendations from business owners throughout the state, creating a portfolio of professional accomplishments that had made me highly sought after in the industry. "Cato's got something special," Morrison continued enthusiastically. "Most accountants his age lack practical experience, but he's been managing real-world business challenges while building technical expertise. We've seen his work with small business restructuring, tax optimization, and financial crisis management. Frankly, we consider ourselves lucky that he finally accepted our offer." Mom's voice was barely audible as she asked, "How long has he been qualified for this type of position?" Morrison's response cut through their family mythology like a knife. Based on his experience and industry reputation, he could have moved into senior-level positions 5 years ago, maybe earlier. Most firms in the region know his work. He's been turning down opportunities for years, though he never explained why he preferred to stay local. The final revelation came when Morrison mentioned my starting salary and benefit package. The figure he quoted was more than double what my parents had assumed I earned from all my employment combined. Morrison explained that my compensation reflected both my proven abilities and the firm's investment in my long-term career development. When I finally emerged from my meeting that afternoon, I found my family waiting in the lobby with expressions of stunned comprehension. The confident woman who had accepted power of attorney a week earlier sat hunched in her chair, overwhelmed by responsibilities she couldn't handle. The parents who had worried about my financial stability were confronting evidence of professional success they had never recognized. Our reunion was awkward and emotionally charged. Dad attempted to speak several times before managing, "Son, we owe you an apology that we don't know how to give." Mom simply cried her tears, reflecting years of misunderstood intentions and unacknowledged sacrifices. But it was Lena who spoke most honestly. "Cato, I'm sorry I accepted something that belonged to you. I thought they needed help with basic organization, not complete financial management. I had no idea what you've been carrying." Standing in that corporate lobby, wearing the professional attire that reflected my actual career level, I finally looked like the person I had been hiding from my family for years. They were seeing me clearly for the first time, but the recognition had come at the cost of a crisis that could have been avoided with honest communication and mutual respect. The conversation that followed would determine whether our family relationships could be rebuilt on a foundation of truth, or whether my decade of service had permanently damaged the possibility of authentic connection between people who had loved each other without understanding each other. The coffee shop near my office became the setting for the most honest conversation our family had ever attempted. Sitting across from my parents and sister, I felt the strange mixture of vindication and sadness that comes from being proven right about something you wished had been wrong. I need you to understand something. I began setting down documentation I had prepared for this inevitable confrontation. This isn't about money. This has never been about money. This is about respect acknowledgement and the basic recognition that your comfortable life required someone's sacrifice. Dad reached for the papers with trembling hands, his face already showing the strain of 3 days spent confronting financial realities he had avoided for years. The documentation I provided was even more comprehensive than what I had left in the letter, including legal records that revealed the full scope of my involvement in their financial security. Your house is in my name, I explained calmly, because I refinanced the mortgage in 2021 when you were 3 months behind on payments. You signed the papers without reading them because you trusted me to handle the details. I've been making payments of $1,400 monthly since then, in addition to covering property taxes and insurance. Mom's voice broke as she asked, "How long have we been unable to afford our own lives?" The answer was harder than the question. I walked them through the timeline of their financial decline, starting with Dad's heart attack and Mom's diabetes diagnosis, continuing through the steady erosion of their retirement income, and culminating in their current dependence on my support for basic survival. Without my intervention, they would have lost their home in 2020, been unable to afford medical care in 2021, and faced bankruptcy by 2023. But we never asked you for this. Dad protested, his pride clearly wounded by the revelation of his dependence. That's exactly the problem, I replied. You never asked because you never knew you needed help. I made sure of that. I protected your dignity by hiding the cost of maintaining it. But protection became invisibility, and invisibility became disrespect. I pulled out additional documentation that would serve as my ultimatum. Legal papers showing that technically every dollar I had contributed to their household had been a loan, not a gift. While I had no intention of demanding repayment, the legal structure existed to protect my interests if necessary. I have 2 options to offer you. I continued, my voice steady, despite the emotional weight of the moment. Option 1. I can exercise my legal rights as a creditor and demand immediate repayment of $237,000, which would force you to sell the house and liquidate any remaining assets to settle the debt. The silence that followed was suffocating. Lena's face had gone completely pale as she realized the magnitude of the financial catastrophe she had accepted responsibility for managing. Option 2. I said, softening my tone. We acknowledge what actually happened here, restructure our family relationships based on honesty and mutual respect, and work together toward a sustainable solution that doesn't require anyone's invisible sacrifice. Dad's response surprised me with its directness. We chose option 2 the moment we realized how badly we failed you. The confession that followed was more painful than the financial revelations. Dad admitted that he had always suspected I was contributing more than I acknowledged, but his pride had prevented him from confronting the truth. He had chosen to believe their comfortable lifestyle was sustainable, because questioning it would have required acknowledging his own financial failure. Mom's admission was equally devastating. I knew you were working too much and never dating or traveling or doing things young people should do. But I convinced myself you were just responsible and career-focused, instead of facing that you were sacrificing your 20s to take care of us. The most honest moment came when Lena spoke about her own motivations. I came home because I was broke and scared, not because I wanted to help. I let you believe I was successful because it felt good to finally be the daughter who impressed you. I knew accepting power of attorney was wrong the moment Dad handed me those papers, because I could see in your face that you wanted that responsibility. These confessions opened the door to the deeper conversation our family had needed for years. We talked about communication pride and the dangerous assumption that love automatically includes understanding. We discussed how my protection of their feelings had prevented the honest relationship that could have allowed for shared responsibility rather than hidden sacrifice. The most important moment came when Dad asked, "How do we fix this?" Not the money, the family. How do we fix what we broke between us? My answer had been forming during the lonely drive to Denver. We start over with the truth. No more hidden payments. No more polite fiction about anyone's financial situation. No more assumptions about what other people need or want. We build relationships based on who we actually are, not who we wish we were. I outlined the practical steps this would require: family therapy to address our communication failures, financial counseling to create a sustainable budget based on their actual income, and honest discussion about what level of support I was willing to provide going forward. Most importantly, mutual respect that acknowledged everyone's contributions and limitations without judgment. The emotional breakthrough came when Dad finally said words I had needed to hear for years. "Son, I am proud of you for succeeding despite our failure to see your success. I am grateful for your sacrifice, and I am sorry we made it necessary by being too proud to face our own limitations." Mom added, "I'm proud of you for demanding the respect you deserve. We raised you to put family first, but we forgot to put you first when you needed us to." Even Lena found her voice. "I'm proud of you for walking away when staying became harmful. You taught us that love has to include respect, or it becomes something that hurts instead of something that helps." Sitting in that coffee shop, surrounded by the evidence of years of misunderstanding, we began the slow work of rebuilding relationships based on truth rather than comfortable assumptions. It would take time, therapy, and continued honest communication, but for the first time in a decade, I felt like my family saw me clearly and valued what they saw. 6 months later, I stood in my Denver apartment preparing dinner for Emma, the fellow accountant I had met through Morrison and Associates, when my phone rang with Dad's weekly call. The change in our family dynamic still amazed me every time we spoke. "Cato, your mom wants to know if you and Emma are still planning to visit for Thanksgiving." Dad said, his voice warm with the genuine affection that had replaced the worried tone he used to use with me. "She's been planning the menu for weeks." The contrast was remarkable. Gone were the days of stilted conversations where my parents worried about my career prospects, while I carefully avoided mentioning my actual professional success. Now we talked openly about my work at Morrison and Associates, where I had been promoted to senior partner after leading our firm's expansion into small business consulting. Emma and I discussed our plans to start our own practice specializing in family financial planning, a career direction inspired by my personal experience with family financial communication. "We'll be there Wednesday evening," I confirmed. Emma's excited to meet everyone properly. Family gatherings had transformed completely since our confrontation in Denver. Mom and Dad had embraced the budget counseling I had arranged, learning to live comfortably within their actual income while maintaining their dignity. Their monthly expenses now totaled $2,600, which their combined Social Security and Dad's pension could cover with careful planning. I contributed $500 monthly for medical expenses and home maintenance, an amount that represented support rather than dependence. Lena had surprised everyone with her commitment to rebuilding her life responsibly. After our family meeting, she had enrolled in a practical nursing program at the community college, moved into a modest apartment she could afford, and taken a part-time job at the campus library to cover her expenses while attending school. Her debt remained substantial, but she was making consistent payments while avoiding the credit card lifestyle that had created her original crisis. "Your sister wanted me to tell you she made the dean's list again," Dad added proudly. 4.0 grade point average in her nursing courses. She's applying for the scholarship program that would help with her final year. The transformation in how my parents spoke about both their children reflected our new family dynamic. Instead of comparing Lena's apparent success to my supposed struggles, they now celebrated our different paths with equal enthusiasm. They praised Lena's academic dedication and personal growth while acknowledging my professional accomplishments and generous ongoing support. The most significant change was in our communication style. During our family therapy sessions, we had learned to express needs directly rather than hoping others would guess them correctly. We practiced acknowledging contributions explicitly rather than assuming they were understood. Most importantly, we developed the habit of checking our assumptions about each other's situations before making decisions that affected the entire family. "How are things with Mom's medical management?" I asked, referring to the system we had developed for handling health-related expenses transparently. "She's doing really well with the new insulin routine," Dad replied. "The diabetes educator you found has helped tremendously, and Mom wants you to know that having you involved in her medical planning makes her feel safer, not embarrassed like she used to worry about." This comment reflected one of our biggest breakthroughs. Instead of hiding financial realities to protect pride, we had learned to discuss them openly as a normal part of family planning. Mom now called me directly when she received medical bills, and we reviewed them together to determine appropriate cost sharing. Dad included me in conversations with their financial planner, seeking advice rather than avoiding oversight. These changes had eliminated the exhausting deception that had characterized our relationships for years. Emma emerged from the kitchen where she had been preparing dessert for our dinner guests. "Your family sounds lovely," she said, having overheard enough of the conversation to understand the warm dynamic. "I'm looking forward to meeting parents who raised someone so thoughtful." The irony wasn't lost on me that Emma's comment represented exactly the kind of relationship I had been unable to pursue during my years of hidden financial responsibility. Now, with family relationships based on honesty rather than sacrifice, I had the emotional energy and time to build a partnership with someone who appreciated both my professional success and my family loyalty. After ending the call with Dad, I reflected on the lessons learned from our family crisis. The most important realization was that love without respect becomes a burden for everyone involved. My parents' love for me was genuine, but without understanding and acknowledgement of my contributions, it had become a source of resentment rather than connection. Similarly, my love for them was real, but expressed through secret sacrifice rather than honest communication. It had created an unsustainable dynamic that ultimately harmed everyone. The second lesson was about the importance of direct communication in family relationships. Our crisis could have been avoided if I had been honest about my financial contributions from the beginning, or if my parents had been more observant about the gap between their income and their lifestyle. The polite fiction we maintained to protect each other's feelings had actually prevented the authentic relationships we all desired. Finally, I learned that boundaries strengthen family relationships rather than weakening them. By insisting on acknowledgement and respect, by refusing to continue invisible sacrifice, I had forced our family to develop healthier patterns of interaction. The boundaries I established weren't about punishment. They were about creating space for genuine appreciation and sustainable support. 3 weeks later, I stood in my childhood home watching Dad carve the Thanksgiving turkey, while Mom orchestrated the final preparations with the efficiency she had always possessed. But this time, the scene included open acknowledgement of everyone's contributions, Mom's excellent cooking, Dad's careful attention to family traditions, Lena's help with decorations and cleanup, despite her busy school schedule, and my provision of the financial resources that made the gathering possible. Before we eat, Dad said, raising his glass for his traditional Thanksgiving toast, I want to thank everyone who makes our family strong. Cato, your support and patience with our learning process means everything to us. Lena, your hard work and personal growth inspire us daily. Most importantly, we're grateful to have relationships built on honesty and respect, rather than assumptions and obligation. The toast represented everything our family had worked to achieve: mutual appreciation, open communication, and love expressed through understanding rather than hidden sacrifice. Looking around the table, I felt the deep satisfaction that comes from being seen clearly and valued accurately by the people who matter most. As we finished dinner and began sharing stories from the past 6 months, I realized that our family crisis had given us an unexpected gift: the opportunity to rebuild relationships based on truth rather than comfortable fiction. The process had been painful, but the result was a family dynamic that honored everyone's contributions while supporting everyone's growth. Emma fit naturally into our conversations, understanding intuitively that she was witnessing people who had learned to love each other more effectively through honest communication. When she squeezed my hand under the table, I knew she appreciated both the family that had shaped me and the boundaries that had allowed me to become the partner she deserved. The evening concluded with Lena presenting the family with framed photos from her nursing school graduation ceremony, an event we had all attended to celebrate her academic achievement and career preparation. Looking at those photos, I saw 4 people who had learned that respect and appreciation require ongoing effort rather than automatic assumption, and that family love grows stronger when it includes acknowledgement of each person's individual value and contribution. Standing in my childhood home that night, surrounded by family members who now understood and valued my decade of service, while supporting my independent adult life, I felt the peace that comes from relationships built on truth rather than sacrifice. The boy who had given up Denver for family obligations had become the man who could choose family engagement from a position of strength rather than duty, and that choice made all the difference. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt invisible in your family, despite making significant sacrifices for their benefit? How do you balance taking care of people you love with demanding the respect you deserve? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video if it resonated with your experience. Subscribe for more stories about family dynamics, personal growth, and finding your voice in relationships that matter. Share this with someone who needs to hear that love and respect must go together to create healthy family bonds. Thank you for listening. And remember that standing up for yourself isn't selfish when it teaches others how to value what you bring to their lives.